everyone, it's Lara from the library again, and I am here to put on our Steam Studio video program for today, Bready or Not, all you need to know about yeast. So the reason why we've done this program is because we've noticed a lot of people are taking up baking as a hobby, and we wanted to talk about the science of why yeast works. So what is yeast? Yeast is a single-celled organism. So it's actually alive. It's just dormant when you start to bake with it. It needs food, and it also breathes. So if you get yeast from the store, there's lots of different types that you can get. I have some right here, and it's an active dry yeast, and I'm going to hold my finger up nice and close to the camera. And in its dormant stage, it just looks like teeny tiny little, almost like sugar granules that are a little bit long. So it's dormant right now, it's asleep, and when you wake it up, that's when it starts to do its work. So usually if you're using a recipe, it'll say something like, bloom your yeast in warm water and add sugar to it, and all of that is actually waking it up, and it's making it it can have some food, which is the sugar, so it's super hungry. And after it eats, so after the yeast has been munching on the sugar, it actually starts to breathe, and this process is called anaerobic respiration. So we as humans, we actually do something called aerobic respiration. So aerobic means we need oxygen. That's how we breathe. When yeast has been fed, it starts doing something called anaerobic respiration. So it doesn't need oxygen, but once it's converting all of that sugar into energy, one of the things that it also does is it creates carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is what goes through your bread, and it is what makes your bread nice and airy and fluffy, and you get lots of holes in it. And that's how your bread dough rises, when you put it somewhere warm, and then that yeast will still keep eating the sugar. It's still producing that carbon dioxide. So what we're going to be doing today for part of our video, so our first part, we're actually going to be using yeast, sugar, and water to blow up a balloon. And this one has been sitting for about a half hour, and you can see how it's blown up right here. That's all the carbon dioxide in it. And if you look here as well, the yeast, I put it in about 3 centimeters of water. It's now bloomed up and up and up and up and up with all of that carbon dioxide in there because it was fed some sugar as well. So it has grown quite a bit. So for today, we will need some warm water. We're going to need some sugar. We're going to need, of course, our yeast. I have a funnel. The funnel is optional, but it is very, very handy if you want to use a water bottle. You can use a smaller container as long as your balloon fits on top of it. And you also need a teaspoon measuring spoon for your sugar. So I have my warm water in here already. It's just been waiting. So what we want to do to show how yeast can actually breathe with anaerobic respiration is we want to put our yeast right into our warm water. And again, that's sometimes called blooming. So we're waking up our dormant yeast. And I'm going to pour it all in here. And for anyone wondering at home, I do have a worksheet that's going to be attached under this video on Facebook. So it'll give you all the instructions there in case you don't want to pause or if you're worried that you've missed something. Everything will be there. So in about 3 centimeters of warm water, I've poured in my yeast. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my funnel out and I'm just going to swirl it together so that yeast is getting a little bit dissolved or mostly dissolved in that warm water. And so it's going to turn a bit of a murky browny color. It's okay. So now, once most of it has been dissolved, what we'll do is we'll add our teaspoon of sugar. So this is going to be the yeast's food. So that goes in there. We're going to swirl it around again. And then we're going to put our balloon on top. And make sure that before you put your balloon on, that you blow it up a couple times, and that will make sure that your balloon can actually expand a little bit. So there is the first part of today's video. So you may be wondering, what's the other part of today's video? In order to demonstrate how yeast actually works in bread, I, on the weekend, did a couple short videos to share with you of me baking bread. So I used a really simple recipe. It's just flour, yeast, a bit of water, a bit of sugar, and some salt and milk. And what I did was I made bread. So with this recipe, it makes a lot of bread, and so what I decided to do was to make some bread ladybugs. So here's my original version. And I have another one down here. So this is my colored version of the ladybug. So he's all nice and red and black. So please keep in mind, I am still an amateur baker. I learned a lot about coloring bread this weekend. But yeah, so stay tuned, and in a couple seconds we'll be swapping over to watching the video of me at home baking. And before I forget to share with you, a big shout out to everyone who has been supporting us with library takeaway or in takeout service. It's been going really, really well. This week we're checking in a bunch of the books that were checked or brought back to us, and we're going to be working fast. We're getting through all of your orders, and we're really excited to get those books finding their readers, in the words of my coworker Julia. So this was Bready or Not, all you need to know about yeast, and we're going to swap over to the other video. See you guys later. Hi guys, this is Lara the Library Tech, and today I am in my home kitchen filming part of tomorrow's Steam Studio episode, Bready or Not, all you need to know about yeast. So today I'm going to be talking about yeast, which you can see here. So I've got a couple different types. Some you can find at the store in town. This one I got from Costco a little while ago. Sometimes yeast has different purposes, such as I have a pizza yeast, I have a quick rise, and I have just traditional yeast. For any recipe that you're going to be using with yeast, you should read what they say, and they'll usually specify which one you should use. If not, in a pinch, your generic active dry yeast will work. So why are we talking about yeast? Yeast is actually a really cool single cell organism, and it's actually a fungus, and it's alive, and it's what makes your bread rise. So have you ever seen on a cooking show, or have you seen a family member help, or who is baking in the kitchen, or have you even helped make some bread? And if you notice, the dough, when you make it, which is usually composed of flour, sugar, a liquid, and salt and yeast, it will double in size. So that's what the yeast is doing. So the yeast, when you use it, it actually just looks like little tiny brown grains right here. And this is its dormant stage. So what you have to do with yeast is you have to wake it up, and you can do that with your warm liquids, and you need to feed it because it is alive, and you do that with sugar. So in most recipes, yeast will eat the sugar after it's been woken up, and what happens when it eats the sugar is something called cellular respiration. And cellular respiration happens again when the yeast is eating the sugar, and it will then release carbon dioxide, CO2, and what that does is that's what makes your bread dough grow. It's what makes it rise, it's what makes it nice and fluffy, soft, and then if you look at your bread after it's been baked, you get a lot of holes in it. And so it pushes all that carbon dioxide all through the bread, and that's why you have your soft, fluffy bread instead of a dense, solid, hard thing or something more solid like a tortilla. So today I will be actually showing you how to use a basic bread recipe. And again, it has the flour, it has a liquid, I'm using milk as well as water. It has sugar, it has yeast, and it has salt. So you only need a few things to make a really tasty loaf of bread. And here is my recipe. You can stop the video now to see the recipe and the different measurements. Or if you want, I will have an ingredients list posted at the bottom of the post today where the video is on Facebook. And it'll have a link to a couple information sheets as well as the recipe and the instructions for it. So we need 6 cups of flour. I sifted mine right here. 2 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of yeast, a 1/2 cup sugar to feed that yeast, and 2 cups of lukewarm milk. Soy milk also works just fine. I'm using soy milk for this recipe, and I have another one on the go that used regular milk, and 1 1/4 to a 1/2 cup water. If you do use soy milk, you might need more water than just the 1/2 cup, and that's just because the dough might be a little bit, it might need just the extra moisture to stick together, and so it kneads together properly. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine all of our dry ingredients up to here. I'm going to put them into my stand mixer, and then after I do that, I'm going to mix it for a little bit, and then I'm going to stick in my wet ingredients, so my milk, and the first 1/4 cup of my water. And again, if your dough isn't sticking together when you're kneading it, I'm using a stand mixer, but you can knead this by hand. It just takes lots and lots and lots of muscles. If it's not sticking together and if it's still really shaggy and there's pieces coming apart, you can add that extra bit of water and that will help. So another thing to note is that when you're using 2 cups of lukewarm milk, you want to heat it in the microwave a little by little. So what I did for mine, so it's nice and lukewarm still, I did 30 seconds and then another 30 seconds. So not all at once, but little by little. Okay, so I'm actually going to pause the video for now, and I will come back as soon as my dough has been kneaded all together into one piece, and that's just so you're not spending 10 minutes watching me knead and you don't get to see me make a massive mess. Shh, don't tell anyone. I'll see you guys soon. Okay, so I'm back and I have my ball of dough. So you'll notice that if you use my recipe, this is a very, very dense and heavy ball of dough. And from experience, it does grow to be a very big size. So if you want something a little bit bigger, you can keep it all together. If you want something a little bit smaller, you can divide it up into pieces. So what we do now is we let the yeast do its thing. So we let it use cellular respiration and it eats up all that sugar that's been mixed into the dough. And we are going to let it breathe all of that carbon dioxide in through the rest of the dough, and it's going to rise. So I am going to put this guy into a greased bowl in just a moment. But what I want to show you first is the other recipe that I have had sitting in a warm place for about 90 minutes, so an hour and a half. And this is what he looks like. So this is what happens when you use yeast and you let it rise in the dough, and it's given it all of that lovely, it's aerated everything, and if you look, it's a fair bit bigger than the other one. Sometimes you're going to find that your dough is going to rise a little bit more depending on how warm it is or how humid it is, and sometimes it might not rise as much, but don't worry, it will still grow in the oven and it will be just fine. So we're going to go back to me at the library now, and I am going to bake these guys into some pretty fun shapes. So this has been Lara at home in her kitchen, and you'll see me in the library in just a couple seconds. Bye guys!